I hear a lot of people say that AMD's GPU encoder sucks or is significantly worse than NVENC, enough that some of those people often buy potentially more expensive NVIDIA cards just to have NVENC over AMD's option. Now, since I have a 6900 XT and I'll be damned if it goes to waste while it's just sitting here, I thought I would test that out in this video, so let's have a play. Of course, first, if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more videos like this one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This test became an absolute wormhole of different factors, making me run more and more tests to the point where I couldn't control enough of the factors to get usable results. So I have to limit the scope. And in this video, I'm going to be limiting it to just the footage that you can collect from the respective card's drivers directly. So NVIDIA Shadow Player, whatever that's called now, and Radeon Relive or Relive, whatever that's called. Now you could use OBS as well, and I think that would make for a very good part 2 or a follow-up to this video, so if you want to see that, let me know in the comments down below. But for this video, we're going to be sticking with the drivers. I should also make it clear that I'm using, like I said, a 6900 XT here for the AMD card, and I'm using a 2080 Ti for the NVIDIA one. I would have loved to have used a 3080 or 3000 series card, but I don't have one, and more specifically, as far as I'm aware, the hardware encoder, the NVENC encoder on the 30 series cards is the same one or very similar to the one that's on the 2080 Ti and the 2000 series cards. There wasn't a major change with those encoders, so it should be pretty like for like in terms of generation. And since we're not looking at the graphics card performance here, that doesn't matter too much. So the first thing that I thought to test was recording, since that's essentially what I'm doing anyway. You want to use a nice high bitrate to get really good quality footage that you can then edit and upload to someone like YouTube later. So I picked 30 megabits per second, which is a pretty decent rate for recorded streams or recorded video, where you're going to get a pretty decent quality, but it's also not going to be insanely large file sizes. And I did it with a couple of different games. Watch Dogs Legion for its canned benchmark, which makes it really easy to do side-by-side comparisons. I also ran Cyberpunk 2077 because literally everybody is either playing or watching streams of that, and COD Modern Warfare because it's a nice fast-paced FPS game, and Warzone is still incredibly popular, despite Activision's attempts to apparently kill it with Cold War integrations like their guns and promotions. So let's take a look at some clips, starting with Watch Dogs. Like I said, this is with fairly high bit rates, and, well, there isn't really much difference. Sure, technically speaking, the AMD files are slightly smaller, we'll talk about why in a second, but the overall quality is pretty much good enough on both. You really can't notice a difference. Even when zooming in, there isn't a massive, well, difference here. Even looking at some of the other games, including COD, which is a lot more fast-paced, there really isn't too much of a difference, specifically because at this bitrate, the encoders don't have to work overly hard to compress the footage, as they have generally more bits than they actually need to compress everything down just fine. So for the next part of the test, I thought to test streaming bit rates, specifically Twitch's 6 megabits per second maximum supported rates, which on AMD's driver works just fine. You can record or stream to that with no problems, but on the NVIDIA driver, yeah, no. 10 megabits per second is the lowest it will do. I'm sure if you were to connect the driver specifically to Twitch and stream directly from there, that would work fine. But if you want to record footage, which is the way that I can easily get access to footage to compare them, well, you can't do that on the NVIDIA driver at 6. The lowest it will do is 10, and so I had to rerun all the tests on the AMD system at 10 so that we'd have direct side-by-side comparisons. So finally, the 10 megabit per second shootout, which is the best I can do for an approximation of streaming video quality. So let's take a look at some games. In Watch Dogs Legion at 10 megabits per second, there isn't too much of a difference between the two cards, although there are some slight differences that the ultra discerning viewers might just about notice. I should make it clear that the majority of these clips are entirely for the most part identical. You won't notice a difference between them when watching or playing or whatever else, so it's not a big deal. But if you want to pick apart an encoder, a good way to do that is to zoom all the way in and look at some still frames. The 6900 XT is on the left and the 2080 Ti is on the right, and you can see that with the brickwork in the floor, the 6900 XT clip is a lot sharper, like significantly, the difference between almost a quality setting in game. There is a slight difference in the sharpness of the railing, with the 6900 XT being ever so slightly sharper, slightly more, I guess, realistic. It's not a massive difference, but it is enough to show that, at least in this setup, the AMD encoder seems to do a better job. Otherwise, there's not too many other differences, so let's swap over to a different game and see if we can pick that apart. A fast-paced game like COD Modern Warfare benefits from more bitrate and a better encoder thanks to its fast movement. You can see just after I've got a kill in a similar position that there is definitely a noticeable quality difference. Look at the rooftop of the building. The tiling or corrugated metal looks a fair bit clearer on the AMD side than it does on the NVIDIA one, and look at those sort of chimney stacks. On the AMD card they look relatively well defined, but on the NVIDIA card they look pretty blurry, pretty hazy. This is a fairly similar trend where on the AMD card it's just ever so slightly crisper, a little bit sharper. It's still not the difference between it being an enjoyable viewing experience and not. They're both plenty watchable, plenty viewable with no problems, but there is a slight improvement on the AMD side of things. The thing is though, the footage you just saw from the AMD card is recorded using H265 or HEVC rather than what NVIDIA uses, which is the older and less efficient H264. That's why the AMD card the clips offered smaller file sizes and better quality. But if you wanted to stream either direct from driver or in something like OBS, you would need to use H264, as that's what most streaming platforms accept. Of course, if you're recording locally, there's pretty much no reason not to use H265, as like I said, it generally offers better quality and smaller file sizes, but if you want to stream, you need to use H264. And of course, this wouldn't be a very good test without comparing direct like for like, so let's do that and see how they stack up. Now taking a look at these Watch Dogs clips again, but with one of them, the AMD one being H264 instead of H265, like I said for the previous set of clips, there really isn't all that much of a difference. Both of these clips are still plenty viewable, plenty watchable. You won't notice this when watching it, playback on stream or whatever else. This won't be the problem you'll notice. But if you want to be a discerning viewer, it has to be noted that the NVIDIA card or the NVIDIA encoder does have the slight edge in this setup. Taking a look at the same bit of floor, you can see that the NVIDIA's floor isn't, overly sharp, but the AMD one is notably slightly less sharp. When taking a look at the background images, the skull that's on the wall there, or the art, is just slightly more crisp on the NVIDIA side than it is on the AMD one. Again, it's not a massive difference, but when you're looking for which one is truly the best, in H264 with the minimum bitrate that the NVIDIA driver lets you use, which is 10 megabits per second, the NVIDIA encoder does have the slight edge in clarity, although not by too much. Taking a look at COD Modern Warfare, this is a similar story to Watch Dogs, but more exaggerated. You can see from these still frames that the NVIDIA one looks a little bit better, a little bit clearer and crisper, and when we zoom in, you can see why. On the AMD side of things, you see a lot of blockiness, sort of visible compression of the image, whereas on the NVIDIA side, it just looks a little soft. It looks like it's slightly missing some details, but it doesn't look as blocky as the AMD one does. Of course, if you were to use AMD's HEVC encoder that's built into the driver, which NVIDIA doesn't have yet, then you will get a better image, but if you were streaming using the NVENC or AMD encoders, the NVIDIA one will do a slightly better job than the AMD one. Now, I should make it clear that all of the clips that we've seen, both the H265, H264, and these like-for-likes, all of the clips are plenty viewable. You won't have issues watching these. These are plenty fine, but we're comparing like-for-like here, and like-for-like, the NVIDIA card or the NVIDIA encoder still does a slightly better job. So yeah, if you run exact like-for-like with H264 encoding on both, then yeah, the NVIDIA card has a slight edge, especially at 1080p 60 FPS at that sort of almost streaming bit rate. Of course, if you were to say drop to 720p, you will get slightly different results, or if you're doing 1080p 30, again, all those sorts of things will vary that around, but at this fairly common refresh rate resolution close enough to the bitrate, you will see a slightly better experience on the NVIDIA card. It does also depend on what kind of game you're playing. In a faster paced game like COD, you will notice more of a difference in your stream rather than slower paced games like, say, Cyberpunk or Watch Dogs Legion. With that said, the difference even in COD isn't so drastic that it constitutes an unwatchable stream versus not. They're still both plenty fine, but if you do want the best that you can get, in this scenario, NVIDIA is better. But if you're recording your footage, especially at higher bit rates so that you can edit some clips later to put on YouTube, the AMD implementation takes the win. The fact that it supports H265 at all versus NVIDIA just flat out not is actually a really nice step up and offers you, like I said, better quality and smaller file sizes, which if you don't have access to tens of terabytes of NAS space available, is kind of nice to have. Of course, you can always just bump up the bitrate on the NVIDIA cards to offset at least the quality difference anyway, but like I said, that file size difference can be a little bit frustrating. In reality, you won't notice all that much difference in the higher bitrate clips. There really isn't much in it, and at the lower bitrate ones, well, you might want to be streaming with your CPU anyway at those sorts of lower streaming bit rates, and so it's kind of up to you. If you do want to use your graphics card encoder to stream at these sorts of settings with faster paced games, NVIDIA does still have the edge. But if you want to record your gameplay, then AMD actually takes the win here. Now with that said, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Which of the two encoders for you is the best? They sort of both have their pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, and so I would love to hear your thoughts on them in those comments down below. Otherwise, if you want to check out more about the 6900 XT, I did a full video on this entire system from Cyberpower, which is absolutely insane. Definitely go check it out. It will be in the cards above or on the end cards at the end. And I'll leave a link to the system in the description down below as well. I'll also leave a few other links in the description to check out some of the cards directly. Those will be Amazon affiliate links that will take you to a local Amazon store where you can see pricing when and where you watch this and all that good stuff. And of course, there are plenty of other links in the description down below you can check out too, like Patreon for access to our Money Men Discord chats, and things like sponsor-free videos, and of course supporting me directly. There's also merch hoodies or t-shirts like this one, or a load of other cool designs, and a load of other options for affiliate links to people like Overclock HK, VPN options, Streamlabs OBS if you want to stream, and a load of other stuff too. Of course, like I said, feel free to check out more videos on the end cards, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to leave those down there too. And like I said, if you want to see a follow-up to this using OBS instead of the built-in drivers, again, let me know down there as well. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you all in the next video.